What the third world Christians have to say to the Christians in the United States of America, or what the Church Universal has to say or wishes to say to the churches in America. America was founded with a glorious vision. The Pilgrim Fathers imagined America as a city set on a hill that it may give light to the whole world. So, the sense of universal relevance as well as universal responsibility lies at the very root of America as a nation with a well defined spiritual destiny. And I am perfectly convinced that the secret of the progress, the greatness, the glory, and the global preeminence of America, which has continued somewhat uninterrupted since the Second World War, owes a great deal to this vision, which goes back a long time. And it was President Ronald Reagan who revived this idea and gave it something of a contemporary resuscitation. But what we have seen over a period of time since Reagan, I'm not saying that Reagan lived up to the full implications of this global vision that America had. What we have seen, especially in his times, is a gradual atrophy, weakening, if you like, or erosion of this vision. And in spite of changes in the ideological and political formations vis-a-vis the governance of United States, this process has continued unabated. The process of the atrophy of the original or originating vision of America. And both the Republicans and the Democrats have participated in it in a continuum without perhaps realizing it. From a superficial point of view or from an episodic point of view, it might so seem that with change of hands in the wielding of power, there are radical shifts. But if you take an overall view of the historical process that's been unfolding since the Second World War, you do not find disjunctions but continuities. And I hope to make that part clear as we proceed. Now, it's only too well known and familiar that America shot into global preeminence after the Second World War. And the period of humanity since then can quite rightly be denoted as Pax Americana. America assumed global responsibilities. In the initial status, responsibility for alleviating human suffering, and the people of America, therefore, rightly earned the name of being or the distinction of being the most generous people under the sun. That was something to be cherished and celebrated. And I am myself a beneficiary of that generosity. When I was a primary school student in a village in Kerala, that village is called Kallumala. I studied in the Kallumala lower primary school, attended classes till standard 4. And during the while I was a student there, I was the beneficiary of the American PL 480 program, by which food items were supplied to third world countries. I remember American maize, American milk powder, and American cheese. very high quality American cheese, and it was eating the cheese that was made available to the children of India under PL 480 way back in the late 50s, that had developed a taste for cheese. Um, so I've tasted the generosity of the American people, and I have no hesitation in saying that that generosity issued largely from the Christian character and the spiritual character of the American culture, because it is in the nature of spirituality which activates a sense of kinship which is global, and therefore encourages people or enables people to realize that all human beings, irrespective of various differences in appearances, constitute together the human family, and therefore one part of the family cannot remain indifferent to the needs and sufferings of others, and it is therefore necessary, it's a duty to reach out to people in need and alleviate their suffering. So I have partaken of that particular distinction of the American culture, American national character, which I relate to this initial originating vision of America as a city founded on a hill. So that was the phase with which my consciousness about America began. So I began to notice that America reached out to peoples in different parts of the world and was very generous in responding to those needs. But then, particularly after the collapse of the bipolar world, signaled by the dismantling of the Wall of Berlin in 1989, America entered another phase when America became the global policeman. So even then, the universalism of the American vision did not disappear. In the period between 1945 and 1989, the globalism or universalism of the American vision expressed itself largely in terms of reaching out to people in need and making a difference for the better in their conditions, of which, as I said, I'm a personal beneficiary. Since 1989, at least I find this role changing somewhat and assuming more of a military character, by virtue of which America came to be recognized as the authenticated global policeman. So the American might began to impact various pockets of conflict, tension, fluidity, etc. But in the process, what has happened is that the emphasis shifted from a global perception of American generosity to a completely different global perception of American selfishness underlying the American instinct to dominate peoples and nations all over the world. And that generated a fair degree of resentment. And this particular realization or this suspicion was intensified several fold in the early 90s because of the policies adopted by the senior George Bush, provoked no doubt by the attack on the Twin Tower by Islamic jihadi terrorists. And the global war on terror was launched, and gradually the predictable happened. The distinction between war on terror and war of terror disappeared, and the global resentment of America got intensified. And that gathered further momentum when it came to light that in order to provide a rationale for very brutal military intervention in the Middle East, America resorted to outright foul propaganda based on utter falsehood. By now, it's clear to the global community that whatever the American propaganda said about Saddam Hussein and Iraq and the people of the region as a whole was falsehood, undiluted falsehood. Now, with this, the American credibility and the American stature, in my opinion, took a very severe beating. So, the stature of America suffered, as was inevitable. Because, after all, if you want to play a global role, then you have to have a stature and a moral credibility and a moral authority commensurate with that role. And in my opinion, because of geopolitical calculations driven by economic considerations, which actually means greed, which then got, of course, articulated in great detail through the globalization project, which was mainly driven by America, the emphasis shifted from generosity to greed. I don't know if this is recognized adequately, but I'm articulating a third world perspective, or if Indians don't want to consider now, because of their sense of national pride as part of the third world, the developing nations perspective. And as a Christian based in India, and particularly responding to the idea that America is a Christian nation, about which I have serious reservations, I have no hesitation in confessing that in my own impressions, in my own understanding, the image of America gradually changed, morphed itself from being a nation of generosity to becoming a nation of greed. Greed. Now that's a terrible thing, terrible thing. And this took a serious toll on the American image, and America came to be despised and hated globally. And I remember many instances in which terrorist attacks nicked America. Many American leaders sort of bemoaning it in public, saying, what is it that makes people all over the world hate America? We are very generous, we reach out to people, we help people everywhere, we stand with people in their and the hour of their difficulty, but we end up despised. It's very true. America commands a very large amount of distrust and hatred from peoples all over the world, including people who have been in former times major beneficiaries of American generosity. And I understand this in terms of the shift from generosity to greed. You can't shift your foundation from generosity to greed and still claim the kind of goodwill and respect that you commanded in the earlier phase when you were distinguished more by your generosity than by your greed. Surely the American intervention in the Middle East is not driven by generosity, it's driven entirely, brutally by greed. And the same can be said about American involvement anywhere else. And whether the government was in the hands of the Democrats or Republicans, it mattered little in the process. So, what has happened is, now the moral or ethical issue comes. When a nation succumbs to greed, what happens is it suffers a very major loss of ground in terms of its previous standing. So, the American image as a city set on a hill, that of course took a very severe body blow. The American image as a people of generosity, a nation of generosity, took a blow, a serious blow. But then comes the third stage in which, and that is a stage into which America has now entered thanks to Donald Trump. And this is what I plead with the American Christians, American churches to realize, particularly because there are many American Christians who are foolish enough to believe that Trump becoming the president of America is a windfall for American Christianity. It's anything but that. I say this as a non-partisan observer from a distance. Let me explain why I think so. What Trump represents, and he makes no secret of it, what Trump represents, as is amply evident from his proclamation, America First, America First, is, for all practical purposes, an abandonment, a jettisoning, throwing away of global responsibility and global relevance. And all the executive action that Donald Trump has taken since assuming office as the president, the 47th president of the United States, dragged the country in that direction. Preeminent, of course, is America signing out of the Paris Climate Accord. But that's not the only instance. So what we see here is America under Trump willfully shrinking and retreating from the global role it was accustomed to playing into its own region, or concern confined largely within its own geographic boundaries. So America first. And then for some strange reason it's assumed that this reduced vision and minimized zone of responsibility will contribute to the greatness of America. Make America great again, the MAGA movement. MAGA movement. If history means anything at all, if our sense of history has not fooled us, one thing I can tell you, that the final outcome, and that's not in the distant future, in the near future you will see this, the outcome of this process will not be the attainment of greatness or the retrieval of the lost greatness of America. It will be the further, shall we say, debunking of America, demeaning of America, and reduction of America. America will not become great again, and certainly not if this is presumed to be the approach route to that greatness. So, what is envisaged, whether it is publicly accepted or not, what this particular standpoint, this particular outlook on the world, the negative outlook on the world, implied in the idea of America first and then make America great again, is the redefining of the relationship between America and the rest of the global community in terms of a parasitical or one-way relationship. It is not that America is going to be completely cut off from the rest of the world, though America will have serious difficulties with relating to various countries. America's relationship with various countries will run into rough patches that I can predict for sure. But that's not the only thing. The thing is that because America will now redefine its foreign policy more explicitly, it's been so for a period of time, as I've indicated, but now in a very outright, blunt, forthright manner, America is stating, look, we will relate to the rest of the world only in terms of our own interest, and we couldn't care less for what happens to you and where you are and what pickle you are. We will relate to you only in terms of our own interest. Now, what happens to the other party to which America will relate? Any country in the world. So, a certain negative energy is being introduced into international relations. And the lead for this is being taken by America, which even today is the leading nation, the only superpower in the world. Of course, China is right at the heels of America, but not yet. Not yet. It's not yet there. So the American model of relating to everybody else only in terms of its own interest, which is global parasitism, that will have serious consequences not only for the global community but also for the people of America, American citizens. It will have a very negative impact on the American culture, the American character, the American image, and the degree of respect that America commanded till recently in the global arena. And this degree of global respect has taken a beating uh, uh, under Bush's watch, Biden's watch. And that process will be further consolidated through Trump's. And that's why I'm saying that unlike others, I see perfect continuity from Biden to Trump, except that if Biden placed America on the third rung of the ladder, Trump is going to position America on the first rung of the ladder, much lower. And with that, the global image of America and the respect that Americans commanded everywhere, everything is going to take a beating. There's no question about it. And this will not redound to the long-term interest of America and its people. And at any rate, this much I'm very clear about. At any rate, this is a completely manifestly unchristian orientation or twist. You can't be a Christian and live to yourself. The one thing that a Christian cannot do, though most Christians do this, that's another matter. If you are a genuine Christian, the one thing you cannot do is to live for yourself. To be a Christian is to be in a state of responsibility for the wider context. I'm not the one saying this. It is clearly stated by Jesus Christ himself. That's precisely what he meant when he said, "You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world." In other words, what Jesus is saying metaphorically is that to be a Christian is to be in a state of global responsibility. Think of the parable of the mustard seed, a small thing, the tiniest of the seeds, sprouts and becomes a tree that sends its branches to the end of the world. Of course, it's a poetic exaggeration, but it's an exaggeration of a fundamental truth which no Christian can overlook, either as an individual or as a nation. So, what has happened and what is happening and will continue to happen under Trump's watch is the further and startling erosion of the Christian culture of America, and with that, the spiritual culture. And with that, I'm afraid the very foundation of Americanness, whatever was globally valued and respected in connection with America, will be seriously eroded, imperiled, jeopardized. So, what's going to happen in America is not just a political decline, which it will happen, mark my words, it will happen. America will become a far more criminalized society, far less disciplined society, far less competent society, because there's a necessary connection between competence and spirituality. You cannot excel if your moral foundations are weak. And therefore, the rattling effect of the Chinese breakthrough in AI technology, open source technology, DeepSeek, on American companies, causing a loss, a mammoth loss of over $600 billion, is an early shot in this direction. Many more rude jolts are in the offing, mark my words. I have no material evidence for saying this. I'm just depending on my sense and my logic of history. This will continue to happen. And the American genius will decline because there is nothing for the genius to rest on. And in particular, Americans should be worried about the negative attitude that Trump is legitimizing and propagating towards people who are supposed to be alien. America is a land of aliens. There's nobody in America who has not come into the land from outside. And the receptivity, the warm welcome that America extended to people from all corners of the world precisely constituted its inner strength and its economic, social dynamism, and that was the secret of his progress. And today, Trump, in its magnificent foolishness, thinks that America can be great again, by simply focusing on itself, America first, an attitude that necessarily breeds an outlook of intense, hateful negativity to the perceived other, OTHER, the perceived other. Others are dangers, others are threats, others are criminals, others are dogs or what, swines. Now, this attitude is not even human, leave alone spiritual. And this is going to take a very heavy toll on American culture, American character, American economy, and above all, the American image worldwide. So, this is a journey. America is still at the beginning of that journey. I can say without any hesitation, without the faintest shadow of doubt, that this is a bus ride to nowhere. And Americans, if they have any spiritual discernment at all, must stop and think, but make this appeal particularly to the members of the Republican Party, and even more particular to the American evangelical groups who are foolish enough to think that Trump is the savior of Christianity in America, at least, if not globally. He will prove to be the foremost, the arch corrupter of the spirit of Christianity. I have nothing political in making this statement. It is the disinterested, dispassionate conclusion to which I have arrived, looking at the American scenario as it has been shaping over a period of time and with due regard to where it has reached today. The full implications of an attitude or a strategy or a grandstanding embraced at a particular point in time will not become manifest then and there. There is always a time gap. But the consequences will come, sure and certain. Nobody can escape it. That's why it makes sense to alert the American Christians, American churches, as to the serious implications of what is being embraced today without due discernment. One thing is absolutely certain. Trumpism is a blatant contradiction of the originating vision of America that envisaged America as a city set on a hill. I'm not saying that the presidents before Trump did not contribute to the present decay. They all contributed, including Biden, including Obama, including Reagan, etc., etc. The slump has been happening in a gradual manner. But today, it seems to be crashing onto the base valley. That is something that nobody can overlook. Well, this is what, from a distance, from the land of India, it seems to be the case. And I can only share these concerns in good faith, hoping that people who matter in the United States will pay heed to this and see if course corrections can be embraced while there is still time for it. For everything is time bound. As Jesus said, do the work of light while there is light, for the night is coming when no man can do any good work. So this is the time, and therefore these words. May God bless America. May God give discernment and wisdom to the people of America, particularly to the churches in America, which have now entered into a new phase of unprecedented responsibility, whether or not the American churches would be up to the task of serving as the conscience keepers of the nation. Time will prove, so we wait in hope and a fair degree of apprehension. Thank you.